happen to me? What is the meaning of this? So we are into episode 2 of our inquiry, and the first part of the journey was about the body and really looking at why we've numbed out to it, why we can't feel it, why we can't hear it, and the fairly intensive programming that we've gone through as children to arrive in this state. So now we're going to look at guilt, which is, as I see it, the primary obstacle for finding the meaning of why something happened to you. If one is willing to look, if one can get through the obstacles of too busy, too distracted, and the big obstacle of the meaning can't be found, then we are confronted with, all right, I'm going to take responsibility, because this is what the journey really starts with. This is the lens we're looking through that's different. Let's just suspend disbelief for a moment and say, maybe it wasn't the toxins out there that got me sick. Maybe it wasn't, all these other reasons that we tend to blame out there. Maybe there is something going on in my mind that illness or trauma, shock of any sort, is wanting to wake me up to, wanting to shake me and rattle me. Of course, that's how I feel. That is what happened to me. And that's why I want to share this so much, because when I took responsibility, it took me down a pathway of inquiry where I found incredible treasure along the way. And as a psychologist and as a meditator, I found a lot of treasure in my day, but nothing has compared to this particular inquiry. Nothing has unearthed as many deeply denied things in myself as this particular inquiry. One of the really big things that is going to be revealed in this talk is the immense power of choice. Again, with guilt, with this whole talk about guilt, I'm going to paint two perspectives. Very, very different perspectives. And we saw with the body talk how those perspectives influence us. And we're going to go further this time and start really looking at the power of choice. And we're going to put the two perspectives side by side and show how a change in thought and a change in perspective can move you far, far faster towards the dimension of, or the perspective of, a much easier life, a life that has considerably more peace of mind, and maybe will help you to heal faster. Certainly it'll help you to uncover a lot of things you didn't know about yourself. That's guaranteed. One of the most interesting things to me is how unconscious we are about the power of choice. It's almost like it's been kept secret from us. It's almost like there's a force that doesn't want us to come into our full power, and hence this power of choice, the art of thought, so to speak, is not even taught in schools. The most potent ability to create that we have inside of ourselves is not even taught in school. And this is really tragic in my opinion. Now, there's one word in the English language that illustrates this power of choice extremely well, and also illustrates the two dimensions. And I will mention this word often because it's such a perfect example, and it's the word sin. In one paradigm, you've sinned, you've done something unpardonable, and because of that, you will receive punishment. And we're going to explore today why guilt and punishment are so deeply tied in our psyches. So in that paradigm, you've got, bad stuff's going to happen to you for sure because you really messed up. You may have really messed up by even being born. So then we have the other paradigm which is the true meaning of the word sin. And this true meaning is what I say got distorted over time, and it's the true meaning. But in any case, whatever's the truth, we're going to look through this lens today. And this lens says you're an archer, and sin means to miss the mark. So, and we must understand that the only way to learn how to hit the mark, which is symbolically peace of mind, health, whatever your particular, aim is aimed at, maybe union with God. Each time you miss that mark is actually your success. Because if used properly, mistakes, if we stop a moment and go, how did I mess up just then? Why didn't I hit the mark? Then we can make the adjustments necessary to try again. Try one more time. Now maybe we'll lean a little more to the left. The big mistake, as I see it, is not looking at our mistakes and saying, where did I go wrong so that I can readjust? All right, so the word sin is an excellent example of what I call mental imprisonment. And all of these talks are talking about ways that we are imprisoning our minds, which has radical effects on our lives without even knowing it. We have inherited, just by being born, a lot of ideas that are incorrect. And not only are they incorrect, but they've been sewn into our psyches, deep into every single cell as we were growing. And we grew up with everybody believed these things, so of course they're the truth. Sin is one excellent example. Guilt is another. Because if you look at sin, if you really take the other perspective and you choose to change your perspective on the word, then in fact, punishment, the whole concept of guilt goes out the window, and so does the concept of punishment. You've just made a mistake. There's no punishment going to happen for that. In fact, it's like, good, you did a great job, you screwed up again, it gets you that much closer to where you want to go. Okay, that's the perspective we're looking at today. But how did we get here? That we have to take that into account for a really good reason, and that reason is when we all look at our guilt, and I think I can make broad general statements about this, most of us feel very ashamed, and we feel responsible for our own guilt, and all of this pretty much goes subconscious. But what I'm going to show you is how much of it is not our fault, how much got sewn into us before we could even decide whether or not we wanted these very, very limiting ideas. That's why I call them mental imprisonment, ideas that imprison, because they narrow everything down. If you just take the idea of a very strictly religious person, and say, well, I won't name names, but the more one believes in the concept of sin, the more one is rendered paralyzed. If you step to the left at all, that's a sin. So it keeps one in an extremely rigid box. So we've looked at the body, and now we're going to look at how socially all this guilt got sewn into us. Well, the body was a big part of it. And we saw in that inquiry how the whole sense of ranking, better than, less than, all of that contributed to the body's sense of shame. We're very numb to the body, and our entire toddler experience and our school experience and our work experience was all gauging how you look, gauging how you appear. Your appearance is who you are. Your body is who you are. These are the radically incorrect ideas that I want to correct with all of this, because what I see, and this is how we turned it around, the 180-degree flip, is by saying the body is merely a vehicle that our spirit is inhabiting, and it needs to be communicated with in a much kinder fashion as just the very basis of beginning this inquiry. So what we get into next is what happens between parents and children. And this is where it begins, this whole concept of punishment and guilt. And we see that our entire culture, and I'd love to study other cultures to see how this could be done better, is geared towards good, bad, real strong opposites. Bad behavior gets punished. That's how you control children. Everybody knows that, right? Wrong. It's a really incorrect way to deal with childhood behavior because it does set up this lifelong fear that if I screw up, I'm going to be punished. So imagine you're a young child and you're desperately seeking mommy's and daddy's approval because you're hardwired instinctually in your DNA to make sure they love you or you're going to die, basically. So mommy and daddy are extremely critical of you for some reason, right? And so not only do you start feeling terrible shame, you've disappointed mommy and daddy, and they let you know about that. Maybe they don't talk to you as much. Maybe they take away privileges. Maybe they shame you. Maybe they got really angry and hit you. In any case, two things can happen at this point. One, you try even harder to get their approval. Maybe if I accomplish this, they'll love me. Maybe if I become a CEO, they'll love me. You know, this lifelong, huge desire to please these parents who really are very, very, very difficult to please, goes on and on and on and on. Now, the other way one can go is, you know, in totally rebelling against this authority and say no to everything. And that also, in adulthood, doesn't work very well. It trips one up later in life. The parents are always trying to get us to do what is approved of. Now, once again, in society, what is approved of is a very narrow range. If you look at, say, suburban Midwest, you've got a real tight range. You better stay really tight and narrow with your behavior or you're not going to be approved of. So the approval of mommy and daddy goes all the way into the neighborhood even. And mommy and daddy show their disapproval in many, many ways. And conscious and subconscious. Some of the subconscious ways that they do this is in comparing their children. Little Billy here is the smart one. Mommy glows with pride. And she's got the neighbors over, and everybody looks at the poor little shy one in the corner. Just automatically, they look at the other child, and mommy goes, yeah, she doesn't even talk, you know. Or, oh yeah, she's the stubborn one, you know, labeled massively. Over and over and over, these labels are put on children. Imagine a mom even talking on the phone about her children. Her toddlers are right there in the room with her, and she's saying, oh my God, his temper, I don't think he'll ever get over his temper. Or he's mean to his sister, and you know, on, blaming and putting down and criticizing. So Billy tries really, really hard to get that approval. And this goes on with siblings, all right? So siblings then have learned to do exactly what mommy and daddy have taught, and the whole put-down thing is like massive. Of course, now we look at schools and the bullying is just off the charts. And if you look at the kids who bully, of course, they were the ones that were bullied, big surprise. So the siblings, the very, you know, all your neighbors and all your siblings join in certain choruses of putting you down because that's what we all learn to do. That's our social engagement, our put downs and criticisms. And we're measured extremely hard right from school age on our accomplishments. So what happens in school? Now we're off the playground and now we're in kindergarten and whatever, and it gets intensified incredibly because now the ranking system is real clear. A, B, C, D, E, F. You know, it's like, where are you? I'll never forget in 6th grade when math got into verbal problems that I never figured out. I thought about math as the perfect way to show how dumb I was. It's like it was numerically absolutely clear that I was how dumb I was. And I wonder how many children feel this. You know, then we've got the gifted in one class and the not at all gifted in the other classes. And all the way through school, there's this intense ranking system. And if you're cute and attractive and smart, you are golden. If you are having trouble in any way, shape, or form, you've got real problems, because not only are your teachers not going to pay as much attention to you, but you're going to be at the brunt end of bullying by zillions of kids. And just imagine how this gets magnified in high school by sexuality. And, you know, you've got the big blown up, you know, egos of the football players who think they're gods because the whole school is worshiping them. And then you've got the ones who aren't measuring up. And that's a critical part of all of this, is this sense of unworthiness that we all take on subconsciously that is eating us alive, basically. And that's why I'm saying guilt is our #1 killer. It's under anxiety, it's under depression, it's under illness, it's under all psychological illness. And becoming more aware of it is like radically important, because also of how we raise our children. So also think about the media, and the media is, you know, magnified one more level to what gets paid attention to, what's glorified, what's our hero, what's beautiful. And if you don't measure up to that, and who does, you're a failure, you're unworthy. And you take that in, it's just like it goes in before you even can think about making a choice about this. So our entire, then we get into religion, which I don't think even needs commenting on here, and how much it relies on hierarchical systems. I mean, the military and religion are radically hierarchical, and there is our biggest problem, is this judgment of better than, worse than, radically through our entire society and socialization. When one is unworthy, and so our socialization is geared towards the habit of judgment, and when one is unworthy, that means that they are going to be deserving of punishment. That's a total given inside of us. Now, what are the effects of all of this that are really intense? It's like, how have we even survived all of this to reach adulthood? I don't even know. But what are the effects? Let's just look at it real quick here. Self-esteem gets totally based on the opinions of others. And this is, we take for granted, but is massively destructive. Because what happens is, there's two people, at least two people inside of you. One that's a people pleaser, one that dresses a certain way so that society will accept you, one that says certain things so that you will be accepted and not punished, one who does accomplishments to get love, who chooses love partners to get love, and you've got, on the other side, you've got authenticity. So part of you is very, very geared towards doing what everybody else wants, and the other part is the true you. So this is very clear, let's say, with, you know, the dad who was a football player, who, like, his delicate, sensitive son gets born, and, you know, right from the day one, this guy's going to be a football player, right? Not paying any attention whatsoever to the fact that this child might not be, you know, intrinsically what's called for to be a football player. Very, very sadly, the whole better than thing is called successful. And I'm saying that our whole concept of what is success it's going to be one of those things that needs a 180 shift. Because those that we kept lauding with, yes, you're more beautiful than the others, yes, you're smarter, yes, you're a better football player, those people are dangerous. I mean, I think we can see this played out in our politics right now. Of course, not to name any names, but I saw it played out in my very early childhood, all the way through my youth. I was surrounded by many very successful people. In fact, society would say they were top of the pyramid. And I would just sit at cocktail parties and look around. And I saw, my youth saw how insecure these people were, desperately insecure, how beautifully dressed they were, how, oh, Caddy, dear Hannah, all their conversation was about somebody else and how somebody else was screwed up or didn't do something right or really messed up. The entire socialization was either about politics, finances, or talking about the horrible dress that Susie wore to the party a month ago. That kind of thing. But it was far, far, far worse than this. Some examples. My grandfather was considered one of the most successful men. I mean, you could not really find somebody who is tippy-top except to be president. My grandfather was doing financial deals in a coma on his deathbed. And, more importantly, he hadn't spoken to a member of the family for over 15 years, least of all his wife. Massive dysfunction, and everybody lauded him as a highly successful man. He was super critical of his children. Every single one of his 5 children was marred deeply by that man's criticism that went all the way into his death. He punished his children with his will. I mean, with his, with how much money he left them or did not. And then there was the other man who was the father of a very close friend of mine, also considered a very successful lawyer. Beautiful clothes, beautiful man, polished to the nth degree. But this was his external facade. This was the facade he had created over time to please people. He knew what to do to get people's approval. Meanwhile, at home, he was sexually abusing both daughters. We have to change our ideas of what success is and what we're doing to athletes and, the top high school football player and whatever by putting them on such a pedestal. So, let's look now for a moment at how all this external seeking for approval gets translated into romantic relationships. Okay, so now you've got 2 people that are both oriented towards external approval. Both people did not get enough love as a child for who they really are. In fact, who they really are usually got pretty, kicked about. So these 2 people are trying to relate to one another. Meanwhile, they're both desperate and so codependent, they will do anything to get the love and affection of the other person. Now, this is all fine and good for the first year, maybe. And then it all begins to break down, and everybody's wondering why in our society this is breaking down so much. Well, this is the reason. Because neither person is authentic. Both are playing roles, and the roles drop sooner or later, and then they blame each other for that going on, for the dysfunction suddenly happening in the relationship. So in the whole love relationship thing, we see the guilt tripping played out radically. And guilt tripping is a huge part of everything I've been talking about, obviously. But in the love relationship, because each person is hoping that other person is going to fill up this giant void inside of myself, and when he does not, my wrath, My resentment, my fury is limitless. Blaming him for not filling me up, right? There is the whole problem right there. So we can see that putting the needs of others first, being oriented towards, always towards the other, rather than what do I feel, what do I think, what do I really want to do, is extremely detrimental. And on so many levels, not only are we piling on these layers and layers and layers of guilt, but we're also distancing ourselves, from our true self, such that, you know, many people can be in marriages for 20 and 30 years and they get out of them and it's like, who am I? That wasn't me. Who really am I? Yet, the word selfish is one of the more potent words in our language that many people don't look at. I think it's right up there with the word sin, because it has massive ability to control people, especially women. I heard it a lot as a young girl, and I've noticed that if I look at any average 8-year-old little girl, she is the epitome of generosity. Oh, let me put some makeup on you. Let me comb your hair. Let me make you some popovers. You know, it's just a constant like, here, let's do this for you. You know, and then to call that child selfish is like, I think, a sword in her heart. It's like, talk about confusion happens, right? So we're taught to put everybody else first, put the needs of others first. And if you don't, you're selfish. If you look at your needs and really listen to your own needs, that's selfishness. So this is another one of the words and another one of the attitudes we need to flip. Because if you're recovering from a serious illness or from a trauma of any sort or a death, you need to be really selfish. So you can see how these ancient ideas of what words mean and those vast connections to guilt and all of that can seriously impede our healing. Just one word, and there's so many. I realized when I had cancer that I was going to have to learn to put myself first or I would die. And I couldn't believe how hard it was for me to do that. So that is one very big clue in this journey of looking for why did this happen to me. One of the first things we need to do is sit back and be selfish, meaning, you know, really take time for yourself and take time to love ourselves exactly as we are. And that's the big discipline that comes up with all of this, is can you love yourself exactly as you are with all your quirks? I really love the word atonement. And, you know, I had this strongly religious sense when I was growing up that it was like the punishment that was actually going to get you. You're going to have to atone for those sins, right? But really, if you just break down the word differently, 180 flip, at one meant. At one meant. How can I bring all the parts of my personality, all the parts, with no exception, into love? I feel very strongly this is our whole goal in living on this earth, is to learn how to do that. Not necessarily to do these vast accomplishments that prove to mommy and daddy we're worthy, but can you love yourself unconditionally? So I like to call this entire incorrect thought system, and I hope you're beginning to see how really messed up this was, this whole concept of guilt and punishment and teaching children through punishment and retribution. I call this the ego. And this is not Freud's and Jung's terminology, the way I use it. It is, the definition is anything that wants to tell you you are unworthy. Anything. And there's many, 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 many faces of this. But guilt holds the biggest piece by far. My teacher said actually that we're all looking out on a world made absolutely mad by guilt. And if you begin to look, I think you'll agree with him that it's true. Everybody's stark raving nuts because they're fighting this terrible, terrible burden of guilt. So who, given our ideas of our bodies and how much we hate them and how much they're not measuring up to some idea of beauty or success or accomplishment, and given this enormous load of guilt we also all carry, who wouldn't want to die? I mean, that's really very important part to look at, is this why we need to clear out all this guilt before we leave this planet, because it will eat us away from the inside out before anything else. All right, so remedies. First and foremost, compassion for yourself. First and foremost. Now you can see a lot of garbage was sewn into your consciousness before you had any choice in the matter whatsoever. So in this inquiry, having compassion for yourself will be the first major step. It's like we were all programmed so incorrectly, and so we have to go, okay, I love myself and I'm going to watch the ways that this happened to me and take responsibility and say, yep, I took that on, yep, it's in me now. So knowing, as another part of the remedy, that guilt loves to hide and will multiply in secret and denial. Guilt has to be made conscious. And the more you can share it with somebody else, the better, because secrecy is the guilt's deepest, most beloved tool. So, no, you will find resistance to this inquiry. The ego does not want you to uncover the ways that you're hurting yourself. It wants you to stay in suffering, pain, hurt, the past, essentially. The ego wants us in the past or in the future, certainly not in the present. And so that's the third major remedy, is mindfulness. Major. In fact, mindfulness, you will see, will be in the list of remedies, every single one. To learn to watch the mind as much as humanly possible. An unobserved mind is the problem with everything. Once we become the observer, rather than the one it's all being done to, everything changes. Oh, just watching stuff happen. Big difference from watching and judging stuff happen. Don Juan in the Castaneda books, just experience, experience. That's what we were meant to do on this earth. Come here, have experiences, go, whoa, whoa, then move on. We weren't meant to come and judge our experiences. So, watching the mind for where we judge, watching the mind for where we feel guilty, just watching the moments when other people shame us, when we feel ashamed, when we're reading something, just like, oh, interesting, okay. Setting aside practice periods for this work is vitally important. You can no more expect yourself to learn how to do this without practice than any bodybuilder can expect to learn how to lift hundreds of pounds without a lot of practice. And this probably takes more practice than bodybuilding because, again, you've got resistance. You've got, the ego not wanting you to be still, not wanting you to confront yourself, not wanting you to face yourself, not wanting you to get in contact with your authentic self. Because guess why? There's giant power in your own authenticity because you've taken the many different personalities, the many factions, the many splits, and gone, oneness. Oneness, total acceptance of self. That's what the ego does not want. So becoming aware of the ego in all its nuances is a mighty journey right there. So practice periods help this enormously. It's like, we're going to sit and watch what my mind is doing today, just for 5 minutes, or 3 if you can't handle 5, and just go, what's going on up there? Tune into yourself. That's what we were taught not to do. Now I'm saying we have to do the 180 flip and start tuning into ourselves. Understanding that you have no neutral thoughts. Every thought you have is either going into the paradigm of life is way easier and abundant and fun, or going into the paradigm of life is hard, life is full of suffering and pain. Every thought you have is going into one or the two of these places. Start watching this, and you'll see this very, very clearly. And, I'm not here to try to convince you of this. I am here to try to tell you, try it out. See what you think. And you're going to get your own results, and I know where they're going to go. Along with this is also working not to feed negative thoughts. So I love the expression, don't entertain those thoughts. So I always have this image of sitting down to tea with a thought that says, oh, you're a piece of shit, It's like, no, you don't sit down and argue that point, because that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make, actually. So my ego is constantly telling me how selfish I am, and if I want to get into an egoic battle and really heat things up, I'll start arguing. And I'll start saying, no, I'm not. No, I'm really a good person. No, see, I did all this shit yesterday for somebody else. And tomorrow I'm going to do all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I count up how much I accomplished so that I can argue with the selfish idea. So we don't want to do that. Rather, it's just like a child playing with a knife. And you find your toddler on the ground with a super sharp knife. What do? You definitely don't try to grab that knife, do you? No. What you do is you distract the child first, and then quietly take the knife out of its hand, because you'll get lacerated, and so will the child if you try to fight it. Really good metaphor for this work. So distraction is the key to all of this. You notice your mind starting to go into old, tried and true tirades about how badly you did something 43 years ago, and instead of allowing it to do that, you stop and go, I think I'm going to turn it someplace else. I'm going to look at the mountains. I'm going to look at, snow coming down in late May. So you change the mind, right? Also, pay attention to your vocabulary. Pay attention to habitual phrases. Maybe you want to make a partnership with somebody so you can catch each other on habitual ways of thinking negatively. Of course, when I'm with women, it's so classic how we talk about men. About, you don't even have to finish that sentence. You know what it is. We have to stop that stuff. It is totally not true, totally not fair, and a terrible vibration to be putting out over and over and over. You multiply it with having that conversation about your man to your girlfriend with your toddlers listening, and it's not good. It's really not good. It's not where we want to go. Recapitulation is another Don Juan word that is extremely valuable, and it's part of the remedy of dealing with guilt. And I don't think there's any shortcuts. And it has to do with going back into every place you stashed guilt in your story and reanalyzing whether you really want that meaning attached to it. You really want that guilt? How can you, and then you ask yourself, how can I see this without guilt? What's a guiltless perspective on this? And it's extremely difficult to make the choice to see the guiltless perspective. It's really hard. You think, I can't be that good. I must deserve, the guilt because I did something so bad. But if you reach and really try hard, you can find the guiltless perspective. Now then, you have to choose whether to hold it or not and whether to act from it or not. And that's another whole ball game. Of course, living by your own moral code and by your own authenticity is sort of the foundation for all of this. You know, asking yourself, you know, what is my will in all of this? My teacher used to say, and it shocked me for probably 30 years before I began to really understand it, obey your will. This was the only law, so to speak, he delivered. And his whole thing was, because we're not separated from divine will, if you would, the whole biblical thing of not my will but thine be done being one of the bigger mistakes we've ever listened to, creating the separation in that very idea, my will, thy will, why is there a separation here, right? Oneness. My will is divine will, especially when you feel it real strong in your gut, which is another reason to get more integrated with your own body. Hear your body. Divine will is here in your gut, saying, I want this, I want this. Following our bliss. And that's what divine will is going to tell you about, where your happiness is. We have been programmed to seek happiness probably in 180 degrees in the wrong place. And because this is all because of guilt and all because of programming and all because of advertising. Your challenge, our challenge, humanity's challenge is to begin to say, my will and divine will actually are unified, and this is what I want to do today with my time. And especially if we're ill, doing what your body and what you want to do every day is vitally, vitally important to get life force back in your body. It makes a lot of sense to me. Understand, finally, that pain, physical pain and emotional pain, are resistance to what is. The mind is denying the moment. So this mindfulness and being in the moment is essential for healing and for gaining peace of mind. You've also got this situation where, when you've got pain physically or emotionally now, it merges with the pain of the past and everything gets triggered. You can use this to your advantage. You can use the triggering to go and investigate why you've stashed so much pain and guilt in a certain place in your life. Or you can use it negatively, and the pain compounds and you're worse than ever before because you've got the pain of the past, the pain of the moment, and you're fearing the pain going all the way into the future. So coming back to the now, of course, is the remedy for this. But the most important thing to understand about this entire inquiry into guilt is that here's the power of choice. You have a choice to label yourself in 5 million different ways as a guilty person, an unworthy person. Or you label yourself a blameless person and live by that. Which choice you make determines the entire world you see. This is so important. Which one, which perspective do you want to act from? This one will bring you pain and suffering, guaranteed. This one will bring you increased happiness, guaranteed. Try it out. Thank you.